Hello and welcome to Share.Care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.Care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.Care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.Care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello, Lois. How are you today?
I'm very well and happier because you're around.
Thank you. I'm very honored by that. Who we have here for the audience is Lois Holis. Now, Lois Holis has done some fantastic work in the area of shame guilt. And that I think there's so much depth to what you're doing in the developments, and I'd love to hear about those in respect of this issue that's prominent in the world at the moment is what is manly and men feeling more lonely, lost, and not useful in society. So let's start broadly. What is your take on that as well? What have you experienced with your work with people in respect of men being lost and defining what is manly?
Well, I not to single out men, all people feel that lostness now, but I agree with you, men feel it more so.
Right.
And I think the reason is because women have been more forthright in coming forth with their emotions and things of that sort, because they're more sensitive.
Yeah.
And it hurts more to have those emotions stuck.
Ooh, yeah.
So when something really hurts, you kind of do something about it.
Yeah.
But it hurts men as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that's part of that stoicness where men, it hurts us, but we don't want to show it?
Yeah, and then they say, oh, women complain. Well, that's not too bad sometimes, If I broke my foot.
I've never said that. No, I have. I'll be honest.
But we're more sensitive.
Yeah.
But therefore, we are more vocal.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's just that we're a little bit farther along the line because we've been more vocal, and we've been the caregivers for our children. Men are too, but women on the scale have that more than. So you have to up your emotional game. If you got children, people say mom guilt and so forth, and I've been on several podcasts for that because women have more problems emotionally because they're dealing with the kids, and that the children bring up the issues in the adults. So anyway, I just want to say that men don't feel isolated because you're the only one. Women feel that too, only they respond differently.
I love the way that you've put that in there because there is a polarizing element in the world at the moment where it's men are this and women are that. But as you're saying, both are experiencing it, but women have had thousands of more years to be able to adjust and deal with this, whereas men have been the opposite.
Yeah, because they're stoic. And, I'm in relationship and I understand. My husband's a Navy SEAL. Do I need to go any further? Extremely stoic. Which is very nice and very complimentary, but you have to be able to do some emotional work. So what I've been working with is that there's one thing that I abhor,
Yeah.
very upset about. I'm very upset that men are told, well, we're all told, but
Yeah.
men especially are told, you must be vulnerable.
Right. That's okay. That's a different take because that's
Right. But everybody says that. And I know Brene Brown, and, she's a forerunner with this, and, I respect her, but I don't like the word vulnerable.
Mm,
Okay. Now, before the podcast, I looked up vulnerability.
yeah.
Okay. There are many words, but these words, were in particular defenseless, exposed,
Mm,
susceptible.
yeah.
Okay, there's also the meaning that be vulnerable, be able to talk about your emotions. But vulnerability means defenseless,
Mm,
exposed, and susceptible. So I don't want to be defenseless.
yeah.
My whole life I was defenseless and I cried all the time because I didn't understand about shame guilt. Once I learned about it in my 50s, then I became knowledgeable. So I can be vulnerable with
Mm,
knowledge, but
yeah.
vulnerability without knowledge, I think, is suicidal.
That's an interesting point that you raised because when we look at history and just purely because, well, I'd say a lot because of the different strength differentials. Men had to. They were defending because they had the strength. Women were the carers.
Right,
And as
right.
a result of that, they needed to be stoic because in those when you're in that fighting situation, you can't be going, "Oh, don't hurt me." You have to
Yeah,
be.
and there's
If
and
someone's
there
inflicted
yeah,
some wound, you still have to stand up and defend. Otherwise, you
right,
die. But that
right.
point that you're talking about, defenseless, is really important because that was a question I've always been intrigued by. Because when they talk about men should cry and men should be vulnerable, I think there's certain places where you should
That
be.
is so okay. Vulnerability
Mm,
for a man or a woman without the shame guilt knowledge is horrible
yeah.
because you're absolutely putting yourself in a position to be injured. And men, women
Mm.
are smart and you go, hey, I ain't doing that. And that's a smart person that's going to say that.
I love that. I mean, those words there, and I'm just making that note. But you're putting yourself, if you're doing it completely defenseless, you're putting yourself in a position to be injured.
Be hurt.
Now
And
I
if
mean, and I would put, and the caveat I would put on that, if it was me, would be going in a love relationship. Then you want to be in that position where you are vulnerable to that person because you have that trust. But in the wider world, that's
are you
likely to be
kidding
exploited.
me?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, Damien, would you go into war or battle
Mm.
without armor or a bulletproof vest or a gun?
No, exactly. No, you wouldn't. I
So
wouldn't.
therefore, you're going to war vulnerable.
Yeah.
And going into human nature, humankind is war too.
Mm. Yeah. Well, you just have to look. I mean, in most situations, if you walk into a position, you say, "Okay, attack me. I won't do anything."
Exactly. You
You're
know,
going to be
but
pretty.
that's not even smart.
No.
That's not smart. So now you're telling a man
Mm.
who is DNA specific on being strong and protective and so forth. And they're saying, oh, take away your protection, just be vulnerable. And the man goes, what are you talking about? That's my guts. You can't do that. So that's why it's not working.
Mm.
It's not working. But I thought of another way of handling that now.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear that
So,
because,
so
yeah,
what I'm saying, a man, and um, and please, enlighten me more because I have more women clients than men. So, but that's
yeah,
normal. So anyway, what I've gathered is that a man is very good at striking the enemy,
yeah,
right? And he's made, he has more of that DNA
We go straight
acknowledgement
to the
within
point.
him.
And then I
Get to
noticed
the
that in a
point.
number of schools where my stepdaughter's schools was quite amazing in the sense they'd set up the tables, and it was an all-girls school. They set up tables in a circle because girls have more communicative, whereas my son's school, it's straight line because we get straight to the point.
Exactly, and that's good. That's good.
Yeah. No, that's the point why we get together. We learn from each other.
But I am helping some men specifically with knowing about shame guilt.
Yeah.
And shame guilt, once you know it's a negative, destructive leech energy, it's no good. And the only thing that can do to you is hurt you and harm you. And, we've did this in the other podcasts.
Yes.
And for the new people, this is a quick summary of my work. But if you just entertain me that shame guilt is an energy.
We'll put the link to the other podcast in the show notes so that people can access that.
But I want to get to the solution. We're tired of the problems. So shame guilt energy is destructive, and it has no good qualities. Guilt doesn't make you a better person. Guilt doesn't make you help repent for your sins. Shame guilt is not good for you. So if a man can put that and embody that shame guilt that comes into him, he doesn't have to be vulnerable. He kicks it out. He takes his sword and you're gone. So he's more adept at that procedure than a woman would be. And so I'm not telling him to be vulnerable. I'm telling him to be strong and smart.
Yeah. Okay.
And then once you get rid of the shame guilt, okay, you're not going to get rid of all of it, but at least you have a tool that when you start feeling that loneliness is shame guilt. So you just, get out shame guilt, and then you can talk to your emotions like high depression, high anger, high, whatever. And that's how I help people. But we don't deal with shame guilt because it's undealable. It's an enemy.
Yeah.
So if a man's approach to this would be shame guilt is an enemy.
Yeah.
There's nothing good about it. So you should be strong and you should have armor on you. And don't let it in. Someone's given that to you and you go, no, I don't take it.
Yeah.
You got to be strong, not vulnerable. Like, oh, thank you. Don't come. I mean, that is not anybody, a man or a woman, but especially a man. So that's why men, I believe, partly are having more of a problem because they don't know shame guilt is their enemy. And they're just wide open. Oh, be vulnerable. What's wrong with you? You can't be. Well, that's kind of stupid to be vulnerable.
Yeah. So how does if we're going to define this framework for being manly and linking that to shame guilt, how does that, putting the other side, how does a man deal with that shame guilt and put that aside, and how should they focus to be manly and address that?
Well, when that does come, you have to know that it's no good and you take it out. That's my enemy. And I'm good at protecting myself. I'm good at getting rid of the enemy. A man is good at that.
Yeah.
So that gives him power.
Yeah.
See,
definitely.
he has his power back.
He
feels powerful. He doesn't feel lonely and horrible. He feels powerful because he kicked shame guilt out. He did it.
Yes. Yeah. So there's that feeling self-confident because you're going, I did it. I did it. I did it.
I defended myself.
Yeah.
Against the enemy of shame guilt. Shame guilt is an enemy.
So how does a person recognize that shame guilt? A person and a man specifically?
I feel terrible. I feel lonely. And then you say, is that shaming? Or I feel good? Or then you go, oh, it's shame guilt. Now, I have a film, imgoodfilm.com, and I made shame guilt visible.
Yeah.
So I want the people to see it. So when they feel the shame guilt, they'll get a picture of what it is.
Mm.
We need a visual. The problem is all of this has been, you got to have a tangible item to make it
Yes, that's
real.
very true.
That's why I
Yes.
became a filmmaker.
Yes.
So I show you what shame guilt is. And if you haven't seen that, we all know Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz.
Yes. Yeah. There's no place like home.
Dorothy goes up the yellow brick road
Yeah.
and she's all frightened, so all in powerful Oz.
Yes.
She trembles. And what does Toto, her doggy, do?
Just run
He
straight up.
pulls the curtain back.
Yeah.
And what do we see? A little old man, bald and gray, with a big silver machine, puffing green smoke.
Yeah.
So when the shame guilt comes, you see it as puff of green smoke. That's all it is. And it's your enemy. And what do? And if you don't think of that, think of computer virus, computer, it's scam. You got to spam. What do you do with spam? You delete it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
what you
from that,
do.
because I wondered about that, because we talked about this in one of the other shows, is that there were, go back years ago, there was very defined roles. People knew, the man went to work, the woman looked after the house. They were very clear on their roles. And the relationships that I know where the people are very happy in their relationships, they're very clear in their roles. I'm not saying that the man is working. They have very defined roles within their relationship, and they work very well for that. Some of those relationships are the man stays at home and the woman works, but they know what those roles are. Do you think because we shifted from what was a standard that everyone kind of adopted, well, majority of people kind of adopted, to now we're more flexible, people have lost this ability to decide what is right for them, or they never decided in the first place?
I think that it just stirred the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always been there.
Right. Okay.
It's always been there. So, because 10 years ago, I couldn't even mention the word shame or guilt because they couldn't talk about it, because we don't talk about that, and it doesn't happen, and we don't have any shame guilt.
Yes.
And they said, you can talk about a happiness coach, you can talk about a successful coach, but you can't talk about shame guilt. And they said, you'll never, ever do any good because you have to change your title. You're not a shame guilt educator, because people will just tear that up.
Yeah.
So we're just opening up more and exposing more. But men, they're doing the catch up, as I said before, with the emotions. But don't be vulnerable.
So is
never
that
go to go ahead. You don't go to war without a gun.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to war talking to somebody else without a gun. So I would say the first thing you have to do is get information. You have to understand what shame guilt is. So what does Samson say? Know thy enemy.
Yeah.
Right? So your first job as a man, or as anyone, is to know your enemy. And how do you do that? You go to my website, and I have many podcasts, and I have articles, and you can follow me. And if you, it's all geared for education, because how can you defeat your enemy if you don't know what your enemy is?
Do you think that's when we look at the young people and the young men in particular, where they're not attaching to school, they're not attaching to work, and more concerningly, they're not attaching to women, which I don't understand that. But is that part of when you're saying that the shame guilt is kicking in too much, and they're just deciding, I'm not going to face it, and they just need to say, hey, I need to just put that aside and step out into the world. It is okay.
Don't say I'm putting it aside. Kick the shame guilt out.
Okay. Kick it on its behind.
I mean, what do you do in your computer? And they get spam, spam, spam. What do you do with it? You collect it? No, you put delete.
Yeah.
And unsubscribe.
So do you think
unsubscribe and delete shame guilt.
Exactly. So do you think that's what because when you would look at that perspective, and even, I mean, the part that I look at is, we go, okay, 40% of men, only 40% of men have higher education. you know, what do you think is that driver? Because I mean, to say that men aren't as smart as women, because a lot of women are highly educated now, which is wonderful. It's great, and I love having those conversations with women like yourself and so many others that are just highly intelligent. Do you think that shame guilt kicks in at an early age for boys where they're not wanting to study?
Shame guilt begins when you're born. Okay.
Mm,
It doesn't matter if you're male or female. It just kicks in. It's just that we handle it differently. And that's
mm.
good because men need to be different than women and women need to be different than men. It'd be kind of boring if it wasn't.
It would be. I wouldn't want to
So,
hang around with me all the time.
I mean, so it's important to be a man and
Yeah,
it's important to be a woman. I know there's all this trans, I can't even get into that one, but this is manly. Okay.
yeah.
So we're talking to men and it is, it's just that you hear from so many places, men got to be more vulnerable. They got to be more feeling.
Mm,
Well, yes, I agree, but they got to have education. They can't just go to battle without a
yeah.
sword. You got to educate first, then you can be a little. Then there's another thing that men have to do, and women do too. There are two kinds of people, at least
Mhm,
in my
yeah.
world. I'm not talking about nationalities. I'll get back off there.
Yeah.
There are safe people
Mm,
and unsafe people,
yeah,
and you have to know the difference. What
right.
is a safe person? A safe person is, oh my goodness, this happened and that happened, and oh yeah, Lois, do this or that, and I know you'll do it. That's a say. I can tell my safe person anything.
Mm,
Unsafe people who are narcissistic and they blabber and they make you feel bad because they throw the shame guilt on you. You never tell them anything other than the weather is hot or the weather is cold or, I got a new job or I got a new suit. You never talk your feelings to an unsafe person.
mm. That's where, because what you're saying there is really interesting because from my perspective, they say men should be able to show feelings and ask for help. But like you're saying, it
Only
depends on
if
whether
it's
it's a
safe
safe
people.
person or an unsafe person. Because I had no problem asking people for help, but I was very careful of who I asked for help.
Yes, and that has to be brought out. We, intuitively we would know that,
Mm,
but sometimes when you're stuck in all this mess, you just don't know. But you you have to know who is a safe person and unsafe person. Now you
mm,
don't know that right away.
no.
So you never be vulnerable to a stranger. Are you kidding me? Or to
Yeah.
someone that doesn't like you or someone that's jealous of you.
Mm.
They'll kill you. So
Well, I've had that
yeah,
experience where, yeah, I mean, because that was part of my learning process as to who to ask for help. There were people that early on I would ask, and they would say, "Oh, don't do that. You can't do that." That kind of thing. And
that's really stupid.
initially, I
Don't do
paid
that.
attention to it, but then later in life, I've become aware that it's no, they're not supportive people. They're, and your term, not safe people to be asking for
Yeah,
help.
you can use any terms you want, but you
Mm,
have to clarify. This is all education.
yeah.
You got to be
Well,
knowledgeable. And
yeah.
men are smart.
Yeah.
So they just didn't get the right education. And whenever you hear vulnerability or you see it, you just tear it up or redline it.
Mm,
I think they should take that out of. Why would I want to be defenseless? That
yeah.
is so stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, now it means be receptive to feelings, but your mind knows it to be defenseless.
Mm,
Okay, they may say, "Oh, that's not what I mean," but your mind knows what it means.
yeah.
Okay, I never want to be vulnerable.
Mm.
Like I would, if it's freezing outside, I don't go out without a coat. That's vulnerable.
That's a great
They said, "Oh,
example.
be vulnerable." I'm going, "No, I'm not vulnerable. I'm going to wear my coat, my gloves, and my hat." And I will never be vulnerable to my feelings. To myself, I am. When I do talk to inner critic or talk to myself, I'm vulnerable because I'm safe. I know I'm safe,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to talk to the grocery store person or someone that's very jealous of me.
We've got a couple of
And then
minutes to go before we have to wind up for the radio part. But from that, to sum that up for the radio listeners, I mean, how would you not be vulnerable, but still be in a position to be in touch with your emotions and ask for help? How would you advise men to do that?
well, safe and unsafe people.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. But the first thing you have to do is know shame, guilt, energy is your enemy. And you have the power, men especially have the power to kick it out. You don't
Yeah.
try to heal it. You don't try to put it aside. You kick it out of yourself. And if you can go on my website, and I have many films, and I show you how to do this. So the first thing you have to do is, when you feel the shame, guilt of loneliness, all negative feelings are shame, guilt based. So depression, anxiety, and loneliness is shame, guilt. Your
Mm.
job is to separate the shame, guilt from your emotion. What people do. You can kick shame, guilt out, but you can't kick your loneliness out.
It sounds like
But once,
education is a key point to be able to do that as well.
isn't it what we have to do? We have to educate ourselves, and that's my job. That's what I do. I help
Yeah.
people to educate themselves so they are strong. And if I don't know if I'll ever be vulnerable,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, I'm compassionate and I'm loving and I share, but
Yeah.
I will never be vulnerable. Means you're hanging out there in the wind in the ice storm without a coat.
I love that. I love that. Well, we have to wind up now for the radio listeners. So from that perspective, if you want more, just tune into the podcast to get the balance and the long form of this. But thank you very much for listening in for the radio people, and we'll see you next time on the show. And as I said, for more, tune into the podcast. And we're back for the podcast listeners. So we're continuing on for a more in-depth discussion here on shame, guilt, what is manly, and how to kick shame, guilt on the butt out of your life and treat it as the enemy. I love that, Lois. It's such a refreshing take. But I love that you're using the word power as well. That it gives you power. It gives you control over your life.
Of course, and shame, guilt is a leech,
Mm.
and what does a leech do? It sucks the blood or sucks the power out of you. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be real.
Yeah. I love that
And,
analogy.
and men are powerful, and that's why they're depressed and aimless and loneliness. They
Oh,
lost
I
their
love that.
power. Woman power means a lot, but somehow innately power means more to a man.
Yeah, I love that. And because when we look at that from that perspective, what I always found interesting, having a Catholic upbringing, and I always found it confusing because they talked about the meek shall inherit the earth, and having grown up with the Bible and that, there's so many quotes in there that he'll come back with robes draped in blood and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, that's not a meek person that you're talking about here. How can the meek inherit the earth? But as it turned out, meek from the original Greek meaning wasn't weak. Meek meant you had great power under control, which controlling your shame, guilt, or not controlling it, but kicking it out.
Not your shame, guilt. The shame, guilt. Never identify. It's not mine to own. I don't believe. It's the shame. It's not mine.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
I
just
have
shame, guilt.
my loneliness. I have my depression. They're parts of me, my emotions. But shame, guilt ain't no part of me, Damien.
Yeah. Let's
That
come back
leech
to
is gone.
because I mean, I love, and I guess maybe too, because the school I went to, its motto was knowledge is power. And touching on this topic, you said men want to feel, and women too, but we're focusing on men as well. Men here is men certainly want to feel that power, and you're talking about men not having that power anymore, or not recognizing they have the power, and so they feel helpless.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And everybody's saying, oh, the problem is you got to be vulnerable. And the man's going, what the heck is going on here? Am I that far out of touch? I mean, seriously, because their their whole lives are power.
Yeah.
And you're saying, cut it out, just be vulnerable. And they're going, and that they're hopeless. And I'm not, every time I see the word vulnerable, I want to tear it up and kick them. But,
Isn't that, I mean, let's look at that from the depression side of things. And because from what I understand, the feeling of depression is related to not knowing how to act, not wanting to act. And I read a number of different places where it says if you're doing something, you can't be depressed because you're actively doing something. It's only when you stop and then you're going through this process of thinking and you're not actually acting, you actually get stuck, which is the opposite of powerful. A powerful person never will get stuck. I know from my perspective, I never get stuck. I've always got a solution. I'm always looking for a solution. Whenever something happens,
you may not have it instantly, but you'll have it in 2 or 3 minutes.
Pretty quick, yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Now, I had depression very badly that I couldn't get out of bed.
Yes, that's right. Do you want to talk through that for the listeners and how that connects to?
That's somewhere in the 50s when, my whole life just kind of fell apart. And that was because of all the abuse that I had in my former life, my childhood. And if you don't get the shame guilt out, it just adds up. It doesn't go away because you're not thinking about it. It's just didn't reach that point. And I think that's the midlife crisis is, shame guilt. Shame guilt is midlife crisis is you finally reach the level of shame guilt that you can't handle anymore. And you fall down.
You want to talk more about that? Because that's the midlife crisis.
Everything's shame guilt, baby.
I know. It's amazing when you kick it out, when you get rid of shame guilt, your life is pretty. And I make that joke kind of facetiously, but in partly true. As I mentioned before, I was brought up Catholic, but I also say I can't be Catholic anymore because I don't feel guilt anymore. And I don't feel guilt if I do something and I separate myself from the behavior. If I do something that's, I might not like that. When I look back, I don't go,
you can regret it or change it, but you don't have to be guilty.
I make a plan not to do it in the future. And exactly. And I'm not.
That means, you take the alternate approach. And people that are in guilt, I say, you can be regretful. You can be angry at yourself, or I don't care what you do, but you can't be guilty because guilt is the lowest vibration you can have and still be alive. You can't be
part of that problem that young men, particularly young men, but I mean older men is having as well, is this whole, as you say, it seems to be a lot when you look at it from a shame guilt perspective, it seems almost like you're guilty for being a man who's out there.
Well, yeah, because
you're a perpetrator. You're a violent, horrible. How dare you have this testosterone and
Well, our world has gotten, you poor thing, and I like the compassion. We should have compassion, but they've taken it to the nth degree. Oh, you really hurt your foot, and probably
everyone gets a participation trophy. That kind of thing.
It's overdone.
Yeah,
it's overdone, and being stoic all the time is overdone too. We just got to be in the middle, but we always say that, but that's why it's very confusing for everybody.
Yeah.
But I do feel more upset for the male population because of this vulnerability thing. And I keep bringing it up because that's all you hear, because there's a couple podcasts and other things that I look at, and it's because I was especially interested in this new concept about men using shame guilt as the enemy. Well, it is the enemy, but that means more to a man than a woman. And all they say in men projects and working and coaching and all that, they just have to be vulnerable. And I'm going, it hurts my head.
What would we say from that perspective to men, to young boys, in respect of the shame, guilt, and this vulnerability, what would be the alternative to say, "Oh, this is what you should do"? You should recognize feelings, but don't feel guilty about that. Recognize that you are a good person. I'm just floating these as ideas. What would you suggest as a map for the way forward?
Well, it depends on the situation. So, each individual's situation. I would not do the negative. Like, don't fall off your bike. I learned this in Montessori. They say the children don't hear no or not. The brain doesn't hear that.
No, the unconscious mind doesn't. Correct.
Don't fall off your bike. That is wrong to say. You can say, "Oh, George, have a safe ride. Be safe. Have a fun ride. Have a good time." Don't say, "Don't fall off your bike."
I use that as an example with "don't forget." People often say, "Don't forget something," they'll forget it. Whereas I tell them to say, "Remember this." And when I know when I do it, when I say, "I need to remember this," I remember it.
Exactly. But if you say, "I can't," I can't even say the negative, because I would talk to the child and say, if he did
I'd
something,
say to my son, "Remember to do your homework. Remember to do your karate practice."
Yeah. Can you do the more practice? That if you looked at this book, you may find the answer. Or if they did something wrong deliberately, say, "Well, what you did is not the best approach. Not you are a bad child. You did that.
Well, that's
that's not the best approach." And
that's really key at the moment, what you're saying there, because you said, and I just clicked then when you were talking about that, because we're saying there seems to be a narrative out there that men are bad people, whereas it's certain behaviors. And is that where we need to be talking about? Hey, you're as a man, you are a strong, powerful person, and these behaviors are how you channel that. Is that something where we need to?
Yeah, and I've got 3 grandchildren, but one of them is he's just born a leader, and when he was 8, 9, young, we were in a situation and someone did something that wasn't the best or something, and I would say, "And what would a good and fair king do?"
Ooh, I like that as a framework going forward.
I always say that to him, or if he fell or someone needs.
Because that's giving him power as well.
No matter if it's
kings have power.
No matter if it was good or bad, it doesn't matter. I would say, his name's Caleb. Caleb, what would a good and fair king do?
And the framework you're putting there is amazing. Because it's one good, 2 fair.
Pardon?
The framework that you're putting there, one is good, so you're putting a framework about good, but you're also adding fair in there. I love that.
Yeah, and that just happened to me. So, and you can use that to a man. Say, what would a good and fair king do? If you felt lonely, if you felt not good enough, or if someone did this to you, or if you did do this and you didn't do that, what would a good and fair king do?
That's a great framework. I love that.
And please use it. Let me know what happens. Because I've only done that with my grandson.
Well, we're going to be, this is be shared on the podcast, and I want to put that, there's key points I want to put in the show notes. And one of those is, that's an awesome framework. But it's a simple framework as well. And it's identifiable. I love it.
If it's not simple, you're not going to use it.
That's so true.
Okay,
well, is that part of the problem too? We've got all this complicated thing about, you got to do all this to man, but we need to distill it down to what would a good and fair king do?
Now,
how easy is that?
When I'm tired of work and I'm ready to go midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I watch some cook shows.
Yeah.
And some of them are really good, and and when they start with the 1 and then the 2 and then the 3, I'm going to interest it. When they go 6 and 7 steps, I cut it off. If you can't do it in 1 or 2 steps, I'm not interested, because I'm tired. My mind hurts. I don't want to, get complicated with cooking, and you got to let it steep for this, and then do this, and then do the 3 parts process. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of
But
general.
that's what I mean, because I
Gotta
talk
be
about that a
simple.
lot, that life is easy, and we just overcomplicate it. We make it difficult when there's simple principles. You follow them. What would a good king do? That's a simple
What a
principle.
king and fair king.
Good and fair. That's right. Sorry.
No, it's important. What a good and fair king do?
I love that. That's just such a
No
simple.
matter what he did wrong or what he did right.
But from that perspective, when you're
answer-
looking at a young boy who's, say, like stuck in their basement, not coming out, which that's a general description of some young boys now. And if that young boy was sitting in the basement and said, "Well, what would a good and fair king do now? If I was a good and fair king, what would I do now? Would I sit here, or would I get out, maybe get educated, and do something to help the world?"
Exactly. And if he was something happened to another person and that person got injured or something like that, I said to my grandson, what would a good and fair king do with this argument? Because he saw some people arguing. And what would a good and fair king do to solve the problem?
Yeah.
So it works with any situation.
I love that, to solve the problem as well, because again, you're focusing on the solution.
Yourself and others. Yeah.
Yeah.
You always focus on a solution if you say those words.
That's such a wonderful framework. It's like, what would a good and fair king do
And maybe
in whatever situation
that's
to
what
solve the problem, and use a global framework to address that.
exactly. You can call your podcast "What Would a Good and Fair King Do?"
I love that. Yeah,
I do too.
Yeah,
I do.
But this is where I wonder, from certainly wondering a lot more now talking with you, is, have we really got to the stage where we are overcomplicating it, trying to come up with all these different things, to linking that men are bad as opposed to there's certain behavior, and there's certain behaviors shouldn't do, but a good and fair king is not going to do those behaviors.
Right, and you don't have to put the negative in it. All you do is, what would a good and fair king do?
Yeah. I know from my perspective, that's certainly how I operate with my life. It's always about the objective, what I want to achieve, not what I don't want. This is, what do I want? Most of my the challenges that I have in dealing with clients and other people is trying to get to the point of what do they want, as opposed to what they're trying to avoid. And the
Because
problem.
if you get what you want, you won't be doing what you avoid.
Yeah, no, and this is why I love talking with you, Lois, because I so relate to your philosophy, and I learn from you all the time, because I think I've sorted out very well. And then I talk to you and go, oh, I can do this so much better, and you're so inspiring. And I love having the conversations with you.
Well, you're fun to talk with, and I really want this to spread. I want to help the manly. We need men. We need that vibration. And it's imperative to have the vibration of a man, not a man who doesn't know if he's man or a woman.
Yeah.
I can't get into all that. But a man who is just lonely and feels let down, but his frequency has gone down because the shame guilt has taken over, but he doesn't know it's shame guilt. He's just depressed. Because
people are creatures of habits. We learn, and we get into a stage where we just accept that that's normally our beliefs. From what I understand, belief is just a thought that you've repeated over and over again, and then that becomes habit. So for someone that's gone into that downward phase, that young boy is stuck in. Use the young boy stuck in a basement metaphor. They've had repeated over and over again. They're no good, or whatever. They've got this deep shame guilt. Breaking out of that is breaking that habit and bringing that forth. How could someone do that with all that weight there? What sort of process would you, and I know we need to keep this general because everyone's situation is specific, but what would be some overarching principles to help them go, okay, you're in this stage, you've recognized, the first step is recognize, until they recognize that they need to make that step. But when they do recognize it, what are things that they could do when they take a few steps and then get knocked back and then they start to feel depressed again? What can they do to start breaking that habit?
Well, first, when you're in the state of guilt, shame, it's the same. One's not any better than yours. They're both bad. You have to get out of it.
Yeah.
Just have to get out of it. Now, how do you get out of it? You call a friend. Just say, hi, how are you? I need to talk. That makes your vibration higher. And if you don't have a friend, call the local store, Walmart or Harbor Freight or whatever store. They'll give you the directions and the things of the day, the specials, or call a restaurant. You know, you've got to call a person to talk to you.
Call the clock.
Pardon?
Call the clock. At the third stroke, it will be 6 o'clock. You know, there's someone talking to at least.
Anything. You just need a vibration to lift you out. And I'm serious. This is a 911. Obviously, it's better to call a crisis line, but a lot of people are too shameful even to do that. Okay?
Yeah.
People are too shameful to call the crisis line, to admit that they are that shameful. Shame is bad. Shame is bad. And it isn't because you've been vulnerable. It's because you've been too vulnerable.
Ooh.
Right. Exactly. Now you know why I don't like vulnerability.
Yeah.
It leads yourself to shame and guilt.
Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah.
That's like,
I know.
wow.
So,
I'm still processing. That's going to take a while.
So if you would help me, anytime you see vulnerable, you have to go, no, 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 no. I need people to help me with this.
No, because I'm looking at, and as you said that, and instead of still processing, shame, guilt is because you've been too vulnerable. I'm thinking of, you know, there's so many times in my life where I've been in difficult and bad situations because I was too vulnerable. I was changing myself to suit, and I mean, there's a couple of relationships where I changed myself so much to try and to appease the other person because I felt guilty about what I was doing, and all I was just being me. And wow,
you were too vulnerable.
I was too vulnerable.
Yeah, I know. And they're telling you to get out of shame by being vulnerable, and they just push you down. And the picture I see, the guy walking with his head down, he was too vulnerable.
Yeah.
How horrible is that? And they wonder why we have problems.
Wow. Because as you say, it's not about, I mean, and I'm looking at that now because I think I'm a pretty kind person and go to a lot of lengths to help people. But I don't ever put myself in a situation. It's like, this is me and this is how I'm doing it. And I'm doing it in a kind manner. One of my, the first mantras is be nice. But if it's not aligned with
you're a good and fair king.
I believe so. I'm a Leo, so I have to be. I'm a Leo rat, so I'm really on that spectrum.
I'm a good and fair king.
But where I am in that though is if there isn't an alignment, if someone doesn't, you know, if there's and I had that recently with a family member who behaved in what I think was an abhorrent manner. And I just went, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I didn't jump up and down and have a go at them. I was polite. And I walked away because I'm not disrespecting myself to get into that argument to start with.
Well, you just like, I ain't doing that. I'm not doing that. Bye. You know, and the more excuses you give, the worse it is. I don't do that.
Exactly.
Because if you give too many excuses, I didn't do that. And that's shaming yourself. I don't do that.
Yeah. No, I never give excuses. It's like, this is.
Well, you can give an excuse, but don't keep on going over and over.
Well, I have that. It works so fabulously.
That's Catholic. Mea culpa, mea culpa, right? I've done that.
I want to put the framework around that with that no excuses, because I have that with policies that I implement in companies. When I work with companies and we have a procedure and someone's got a report and I have what I implement is the no excuse policy. It means if you took on a task, you said you were going to do it. If you didn't do it, you can't come in and give an excuse. You just say, I didn't do it. That's all you can do. it's not you're made to feel bad for that.
It
It's
just
just
is the
you.
way it is. It's just,
Exactly. The
that's the
thing
way
that
it is.
the amazing thing was with that I found, and it was a surprise, was the accountability that came. All of a sudden, when people couldn't give an excuse, how
They
much the
had to
action.
be accountable for
Yeah,
that.
and they were very careful about what they said they were going to do. And when
Yes.
they said they were going to do something, it was very rare they didn't. It was usually something very extreme, which again we didn't get into because you're not allowed to give excuses. But outside of the meeting, I made some inquiries and found out things went pear shaped, and that happens in life. But it's amazing when they couldn't give excuses, how
Like the
much.
cat ate my homework, or my cell phone fell on the toilet, or
Exactly. And it's amazing that accountability, and that comes back to, share.care's first principle is responsibility, personal responsibility, which linking to, shame guilt is it's your responsibility to kick out shame guilt.
because you have the power to do it. See, that's what they don't know.
Mm.
Because everybody says church says you need guilt to be glorious. You need guilt to repent. No, you don't.
Well, you
Guilt
can
has
do
no.
that. I look at an example.
You can regret it. You cannot feel guilty.
Well, it's from that perspective. And I've used this example before, because there was times when I reacted with anger, and it wasn't the best way of doing it. And the example I used was, I was at a friend's wedding, and it was helping there, and there was a place at the front for the bride to pull up. Now, it wasn't marked or anything like that, and someone pulled up and parked there and got out with his partner and started walking to church. And I've stormed over and gone, "What the hell are you parking there for? Where's the bride going to park?" And I've jumped down his throat. And he's obviously been upset by that. But when I look back at that now, I don't feel guilty that I did that. I know the behavior wasn't the most appropriate for dealing with that situation. Now, today, if I was in that situation, I would certainly deal with it differently.
Yeah, reframe it. That's all.
Yeah. So it's not, I'm not. And the way I did that is I separate who I am. I know I'm a good person. The behavior and skill
You're
set
good
I had.
and fair king.
Exactly. I'm a good and fair king. And I know at that point in time, that was my reality. That's how I knew to deal with that situation, because that was my
Exactly.
experience. Today is different.
Different, yeah.
I have different
But
behaviors, different resources, different education. I love that you mentioned education.
The reason I interrupted that is because under no circumstances are we to feel guilty. We can regret something, but we cannot feel guilty. You can, if you are guilty, you call your friend, or you don't have a friend, you call a store, or you go outside, talk to somebody, you go out and have a pizza, or go on my website and read my Now is the Time book, because it has spiritual readings that raise your frequency. You can't stay in guilt.
Yeah.
You can't.
So from that perspective, you're saying from that, just get out and talk with someone is a step forward if you're stuck in that.
Talk to your cat, talk to your dog, but
how do you identify? How does someone identify that? Because you mentioned before safe and unsafe people. How can they, for someone that's not used to identifying that?
You just have to learn.
Yeah. But what would be a considerate? Because a safe person, I would imagine, would be someone that's more listening as opposed to telling you, giving advice.
A safe person doesn't shame or guilt you. An unsafe person, it's all shame guilt, David.
A simple principle.
It's a simple.
So that's how you identify, is if you're okay. So the young boy or whoever is there, and they want to get out, and they want to get their life back, get out there, get some power back, go out and do great things in the world. They go out, and first thing is to go and talk to someone, but they need to pay attention when they're talking to them. Is this person trying to shame guilt me, or are they?
But you have to learn what is shame guilt behavior. We don't know. We use it all the time.
Well, so let's talk through that. Let's talk through some of the shame guilt behaviors for people to help identify them.
Oh, it's very insidious. Sometimes they, like, oh my, they really put me down. I didn't even know that. It's a feeling that you're not happy when someone talks to you.
Oh,
it made you feel bad. When somebody makes you feel bad, that's shame guilt.
Yeah. I love that. Someone, the feeling, I'm just writing this down, feeling that of not happy when someone's talking to you.
And if you feel bad and you feel guilty or shameful when someone talks to you, then they're unsafe. Then you go, okay, you put a U on their head,
Yeah. If you're
and
feeling bad or guilty. Sorry, I need this because this is really powerful stuff.
and that's
Guilty.
why I said it's all about education, not about vulnerability. You got to learn. You got to know. You can't put yourself in a dangerous position. Like I would never go down an alley at night when I know there's a group of guys that rob and they have guns.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't talk to people that shame me.
Yeah. So don't, that's a good one. Don't talk to people that shame you. So you want to get out and talk to people, which is good. You need that connection and that helps in that situation. But you want to be talking to people that don't shame
And
you.
even therapists, I'm saying that they do a lot of good work, but there's some therapists that they do the shaming thing because they don't know any different either. People don't know what shame guilt is and so that's why I say to sign up for my newsletter and learn 500 ways you shame yourself or other people shame you.
Yeah, I love that. So, and it's really from that perspective, you should be able to identify that relatively quickly, I would imagine.
Well, because you're smart and you're powerful and you kick it out. When that happens, you just go, no, I don't take it. It's the energy. I don't take it. It
Is that a
doesn't belong.
confidence thing where someone needs to learn that confidence, say, hey, I don't have to do that? Or is it just doing it?
You have confidence. You have all these things. The shame guilt covered it. So just get rid of the shame guilt and then you're confident. You don't have to go to confidence school.
I love that. I so love talking to you, Lois, because and that's why I think people we misuse words. It's like people saying, "I have a bad relationship." Where did you go and get it? At Costco? You can't go to a shelf and buy a relationship. You relate to someone. It's a behavior. It's a verb. It's something you do.
I'm in a bad relationship, but I don't have it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I'm relating to someone in a way that doesn't serve me. I need to either change
because I'm a fair and just king. And if you're male or female, you can be a king. Because king is more assertive, more powerful than the queen, even though the queen. But anyway, I use the king thing.
Well, it depends on you. I mean, too, same token, if you're female, I would imagine you.
If you want to be a queen, fine. I don't care. Just compliment yourself.
Exactly. That's the point.
That's a compliment.
But coming to that confidence thing, though, I love what you're saying is that these things are all inside you already.
What does shame guilt do? Shame guilt turns your positive emotions to negative ones.
Yeah.
Turns compassion to depression, intuition to anxiety, compassion, passion to anger.
Yeah.
So you have all these wonderful things. You just got to get rid of the shame guilt or go to, and that's one thing that I got so excited about was I didn't have to go to therapy for anxiety and anger and suicide and not good enough and all that. I'll be dead beforehand, right?
Yeah.
I just had to get rid of shame guilt energy that was turning my emotions to the negative.
But I love that because one of the programs I teach is called Fearless. And this is why I love talking to you as well, because I believe that's already in. You don't have to learn to be confident.
No, you can't.
Just be confident.
You can't learn. You can't learn that.
It's a behavior. You just do it.
Right. But if you can't do it, it's the shame guilt that's covering it. That's all. Yeah. And it's a shame. It doesn't destroy you. It's just I always say that shame guilt is a black blanket put upon you.
Yeah.
And you take the black blanket off and you throw it away.
So shame guilt is covering all the good skills that you already have inside you.
Exactly. So, and I think that's what you said before about why is it so complicated now? And a lot of it's because of money. You make more money if your course is longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
No, yeah. I always
I
find.
mean, I'm I agree that sometimes you need a year or two, or, but there is some aspect to it that if this more, anybody can make it complex.
Mm. Well,
A
Warren
very
Buffett, from a
intelligent.
money perspective, like making money, because a lot of people, talk about making money. Warren Buffett, who's probably one of the most expert in making money, talks about if you want to do it, get rid of a bunch of IQ. It's pretty simple. And even if you go, I mean, whichever old book you look from, but I know there's George S. Carlson nearly 100 years ago wrote the book The Richest Man in Babylon, and says to be wealthy, you save a bit of what you earn, you invest that, and you reinvest the income. That's simple instructions. It's not difficult.
The simpler, the more truth there is. Truth,
Mm,
truth is simple.
yeah.
When you're doing a lie, you got to talk it out and talk and talk and talk, and you just say one truth. My favorite one is when money talks, truth is absent.
I love what you talked
When,
about then. You just said about, when you're lying, you have to make it more complicated. I've read some
yeah,
reports in certain spaces where there are hundreds of pages and it's talking, and I'm reading going, this is talking around in circles and you're not even making a point.
it's called rhetoric. One of my friends says, I said, I don't understand that. They said, that's what rhetoric is. And I go, oh, I thought I was stupid. I couldn't understand it. They said, no, that's rhetoric. And it's specific language that is made to confuse you.
yeah. Oh, and it said some of these reports I'm reading are going, that this just doesn't make sense. And I wasn't thinking, I don't understand it. I know it doesn't make sense. I don't have
Yeah.
to sit there and think I'm stupid. I can read. I might not
I
be the
smell
best reader, but it clearly doesn't make sense. But like you
I
said,
need
it's because
to,
it's complicated.
yeah. Let me go for one second. I smell something burning.
Oh, okay. You better get that.
One second. Sorry, there was something burning.
I can see the smoke.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
But I
that's
love
okay.
what you were saying. The complicated, making this complicated. But again, in that situation, it's understanding, that you shouldn't be shaming and guilting yourself in the sense of, you look at something going, oh, I don't understand that. It's like you have that power. Just put that
Yeah.
shame guilt aside and say, well, ask the question. You can do it and you can do it in a polite manner, but ask the question.
Okay, that's right. Now I'm 79. It's about 2 years ago, 77, that I learned about rhetoric. And when
Mm.
people do that, it's more of a confusing situation. So it took me 77 years to learn that, Damien. So,
But that's that education you're talking about.
yeah, so we're learning all the time.
Yeah.
And, the fact that you didn't learn it 50 years ago, um, it's okay.
But I think,
So,
that's the point you're saying. I mean, rhetoric is designed to be confusing for that reason, to confuse you, as opposed to getting to
right,
the
because
point.
if you knew the truth, you couldn't be controlled. It's all about being victims. People want us to be victims. That's a
Mm.
whole nother story. That's another podcast.
But it is,
But
I mean, this is when
anyway,
we're coming, I mean, from that point of being manly and being powerful, it is taking that on board, put the shame guilt aside and say, hang on a minute, what
no,
are you really
don't
saying?
put it aside. Kick it
Yeah,
out.
kick it out, kick it out,
I'm
kick it on it,
serious.
shoot the
Kick it
hell out
out.
of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Delete and unsubscribe.
exactly. It's a Death Star. Let's blow it up. Um, so we blow up the shame guilt. We get rid of it, kick it out, and
Right.
then we ask the question. And from that framework, we can do that. A good and fair king will ask the question. Will do it in a polite manner, and stand their ground and say, "Hang on a minute. What are you really saying there?" And stand that ground. A good and fair king will do that.
Right. And now, if you're talking to an unsafe person and you're
Mm.
very smart at this now,
Mm.
and they pull in the shame guilt and trying to confuse you, you can just say, George, what would a good and fair king do with this situation?
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's
That would be,
interesting we talk about that in the rhetoric, because there was a report that came out. Well, it was a report. It was an article in January this year, so in 2023. For those listening 10 years time, I'm finding that out. But it came out in January talking about there's a guy called Andrew Tate who's apparently really misogynistic and things like that. And I haven't really followed him, and I hadn't heard about him at all. And everyone I've asked about that hasn't heard about him either. But apparently he's this popular guy that is influenced in. The article was he was influencing boys, and there was a report done that showed 90 something people at young boys had heard of him. 50% identify with him, and he's a misogynistic asshole, and how dangerous is the world for young boys because they're being influenced by Andrew Tate. I think his name's Andrew Tate. I'll check that later if I've got that wrong. And so it was based on a report done by an organisation here in Australia, in Victoria. I won't name them at this yet, but I wrote to them and I said, can I have a copy of the report? Because I wanted to see what the data was and what was really being said. And when I got the report, it took 2 months before they gave it to me. When I got the report and I went through and actually looked at the data, because they had the data in there, most of the boys certainly didn't agree with that. The part where they did, or where they agreed with him being strong and powerful, saying what he wanted, those kind of things. The part where they agreed with his views on women. Now, this is a man that's, and I've since looked into him, and there is some things that he said about women which are not very nice. But in this research, the part where these young boys identified with him, the only part where they identified with his views on women was he said, understanding women is sometimes confusing. Now, that wasn't women are horrible people and shouldn't vote or anything like that. It was the comment was understanding women is sometimes confusing. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it was words to that effect. That's what the boys identified with. And I'm thinking, is that, understanding people generally can be confusing, but it's not uncommon for a man to say, I don't understand, when she's telling me about her day, I'm thinking she's wanting help, but or she just wants to listen. How many men have confused that?
Yeah. Well, I think, and this is about men, I think we need to say you have to understand yourself first. Before you can understand another person.
That's a good point to put under this, what is manly? Yeah.
Yeah. Understand yourself first. You got to do your own work first. You can interpret what people say.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't not do that, but to really understand, you have to be clear yourself.
I love what you did there too. Like, we're talking about some negative and people that are going on rhetoric, and you just shifted it around to being something positive and giving advice to people that's going to be actually helpful. I love that.
Well, that's why we're here.
Exactly.
That's why we're here, because we want men to be manly. We have to have them manly.
How do they go
and this
through
is women saying this.
I think that's the point, though. I think a lot of women do want men to be manly.
Right.
It's but it is, and that's where I think from shared.care we rewrote the Knights Code, the chivalric code of being respectful, that kind of thing, as a guide. This is a way to go forward. Be respectful.
Good and fair king goes same thing with that. It's everything. So I think
from
it
that
gives
perspective of getting to know yourself. All right, let's take that for a young person getting to, and I know from my perspective, it took me a long time to really, and I spent a lot of time working on that. I used to, for example, when I was in the army and I had holidays, instead of going on a vacation somewhere, a 2-week holiday, I went and did a 2-week neurolinguistics programming course. So I flew across the country on my leave. I went and studied neurolinguistics, and it still took me a long time to work out who I was. How would you, for a young man listening, how would you guide them as to how to go and find themselves?
Well, that's a lifelong journey.
It is.
But somewhere when I was, on trying to figure out things on my own life, even though I was very successful in my job, my individual stuff needed help. And I was such a caregiver.
Yeah.
Think of an operating room nurse who had to think what the surgeon needed next. Like he was doing this and you had to know what he needed. So you were trained to help serve people, trained to find what they needed next for you to help them with it.
Yeah.
So that was even so I mean, that was a good surgical nurse who knew what the surgeon needed. So that's where I'm coming from. So I'm going, what do I like? So I remember I like spaghetti, and I would write it on a Toasty note and put it on the wall. And I loved Liberace's music. I'd put that up there. I love the color blue. So I actually had to put on the wall what I like.
I like
Interesting, isn't it? But that's really starting down. Or I love ice cream. I don't like chocolate. I like vanilla. So I actually had to, I like this dress. I don't like that dress. But I wrote it out and stuck it on the wall. That's more than just writing it down.
I love that you did that, and you talk about writing it out and finding what works for you, as in just identifying it. And again, a simple process.
Very simple.
Yeah.
I like ice cream. I like chocolate. I like to go to the movies. I like to dance. I actually had to ask myself, what do I like?
Yeah.
You may think it's very simple, but that's how you find out what you like.
But that's exactly, because that's what they're answering, that question of how do you identify, or how do you work out who you are? It's identifying what you like. That's pretty simple.
I'm going to get a picture that I want to show you.
Yeah.
When I was trying to figure out who I was, and there were some people I didn't like. I didn't know why, but they didn't treat. I had a very abusive childhood, so there were some people I didn't like. So what I did, and I did this, I started like in the morning, and I ended the next morning. Like I worked all through the night.
Yeah,
I went through all my picture books, all the families, and mothers and fathers and kids and everything, and I made a picture. And this is my picture.
Oh, wow.
This is all of me. I cut everybody out.
Yeah.
And me as a baby, me as a teenager, me receiving my first Holy Communion, me receiving all kinds of things. But it was me as a child.
Yeah. So that's a big picture, a mural for the audio
not
listeners.
Everybody has to do that much, but I had to do it for my own healing. Yeah. And I was looking and I went, oh my goodness, I'm a cute kid, because I'm there laughing, my hair, because I always thought I was ugly because they told me I was ugly. Anyway, so I'm going, I'm a cute person. Wow.
I love that. I mean, for the people listening, that was a massive mural of all different photos of Lois at various parts of her life. But like you're saying, you're reframing because you're looking at yourself and going, I was a cute kid, and as opposed to what others told you. And you're deciding for you what is right for you.
I validated me. No one can validate me but me.
Yeah. Yeah.
They go, oh, they didn't give me the best report, or they didn't. No one, even they tell you you're the most greatest person in the world, you'll still feel like nothing. When you validate,
that's powerful.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So I had to validate myself at every year in my life.
That is, for someone trying to find themselves, it's identifying what you like, but also validating yourself, saying, this is what I like. This is who I am. And deciding. It's not for someone else to decide.
My mother was an incredible seamstress, and she made all my clothes and Halloween costumes. And I went, wow, isn't that beautiful? And I tap dance, and I have tap dancing costumes, and I validated all of that.
Yeah.
I did not know um, mental health wise. This was just an inner, I have to find myself. So I said, I have to find myself. I'll find myself in the pictures. I mean, it
Yeah.
was just simple, common sense. I will find myself if I look at myself, where I am and who I am. And that's how I felt myself and
Yeah.
validated myself.
I love that.
I do too. And I think people can do that too.
Is it from, I mean, because from my perspective, when I went through that process, I ended up going and actually making my own personal mission statement, which was a guide, which is very short. Well, basically, it's I enjoy life and share in the joy of others. I learn something daily that increases my ability to overachieve and confidently and compassionately act from my values of honesty, excellence, and understanding. Simple as that. But that became an overarching principle of how I operate in life. Is that helpful for other people as well, do you think? Or I found it very useful.
Well, everyone has their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker, so obviously the visual is so important to me.
Yeah.
So I would do that more with pictures than words. Because pictures mean more to me than words, but words may mean more to you than pictures. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just that you're doing your own thing. And just because Charlie does it, you don't have to do it. You do what you do. Each person is individual, even though you're like somebody or your kids like you or your mother, you are still different. Every one of us are different.
Yeah.
None of us are completely alike. Some people are like, oh, you wear the same size shoe, the dress, we're a lot alike. And there's a lot of similarities, but no one is exactly like you.
Yeah. So it's really from that perspective, as someone finding themselves, is identify what you like, and that's just ask the question, what do I like? And paying attention to that. It might be, as you said, I like ice cream.
Oh, you know what was
I like
interesting?
vanilla ice cream. Sorry,
yeah. You know what's interesting? I never asked what I don't like. I just realized that now after all these years. I only ask what I like.
Yeah. But that's important because exactly. You need to ask, what do you like?
Not what I don't like.
Yeah.
I'd never put a negative in it.
That's interesting that you never did that. I love that.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I just realized now I never chose a negative. I always ask, what do I like?
I find that's where people struggle a lot because it becomes incongruent. Because if you want to move in a direction, but you're looking the opposite way or any other way than where you want to move, that's really difficult to do.
Of course. And that's what I'm saying. I can't believe that I did that.
Yeah.
That's really smart.
But it is.
Really
but I think that's an important clarification that you've added to that. So when someone's wanting to find themselves, if a young man is wanting to find themselves, then the question they should be asking is, what do I like? Not what don't I like? What do I like?
Exactly. Yeah. What do I like?
And make lists or do whatever it is. Film it.
Yeah. I like bike riding. I like to
put it on YouTube,
walk. I like to run.
Facebook,
but I never put in what I don't like. I think that's amazing.
But it's setting a course of where you're going and what is you. Because you're going, I like this, I like this, this is me. And that's all you need.
And then somebody likes vanilla ice cream. I like vanilla ice cream with peanuts on it. I mean, everybody's different.
And it makes it easier for you to relate to people as well, because you can say, okay, I like this. A person can then identify that, because I have that all the time when I'm talking with someone and they'll tell me what they don't want or and that gives me nothing to work with. You can't work with, because there's so many other stuff there that go, well, how do I move towards something if you're telling me what you don't like?
It's a negative situation.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to make friends with somebody, anyway, well, I learned a lot, Damon. I learned a lot. Thank you.
You always inspire me, Lois. It's wonderful. I know we've talked for a little while now. We probably need to wind up, but if we're going to summarize this for what is manly, how would you just put it in a nutshell for the people out there listening to wanting to find certainly the young men out there wanting to find how to be a man?
When you said what is manly, what flew into my mind was I am my own man. I am. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
I am my own man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I would say summarizes it. And
there's so much
am
in
a
that.
good and fair king who doesn't allow the shame, guilt to come into me from others or from myself. And that's something I have to teach people, is make friends with their inner critic. But that's another talk. So I am in control of who I speak with. I talk to safe people, not unsafe people.
Yeah. I love that. That's
and I have the power to choose who I speak with.
I love those last words. I
was going to put,
I have the power to choose.
Yeah. I was going to say I'm not vulnerable, and I'm never going to use that word. Never let that be. I don't even want to say don't be vulnerable. That's a negative.
Yeah, be powerful.
Be powerful. That's what I say.
Yeah.
You can be powerful. Everything, every word, every walk is my power.
What is manly? Be powerful.
What is manly? My power. What is manly is my power.
Yeah.
Because when you say I'll be, no, that's futuristic. My power. My power.
What is manly?
That's what defines me. Yeah, that's it. That's all there is. There ain't no more.
Yeah. I love
I got to go open the windows because
we'll wind up. Lois, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much for your wisdom as always. I love chatting with you. I love the inspiration. You get me really thinking. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, and please share.
Certainly will. Certainly will.
Okay, blessings.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.